Do more, be better. The podcast where we explore the intersection of business, technology, and personal growth and how they shape our lives, families, and careers. Every week, we dive into the stories of entrepreneurs and innovators who are redefining what it means to achieve professional success while maintaining personal fulfillment. Welcome. Let's get into it. Michelle is a visual strategist for Flatland Visual Thinking in the Netherlands. Every time we chat, she gives me new nuggets to chew on and get my brain thinking differently. I'm really excited to have her on the show today and get her thoughts on a range of topics. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Sal. Looking forward to this podcast.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I know you and I usually just ramble on our daily or our bi-weekly chats, but I thought it'd be fun to get on here and let everybody else that listens to this little podcast in the world get some of the great Michelle nuggets that I always like that I take away and always gets my brain thinking. So I'm excited to talk today.
Thank you.
So one of the things I always like to start with is, what is your favorite thing to do when you're not working?
Oh, great question. So actually, I love to spend time outdoors. So one of the things that I do regularly is I go to the Ardennes, which is in Belgium. It's the country underneath the Netherlands. And I just go there for the weekends together with friends and go hiking, actually. Yeah.
The being outdoor thing is kind of a thread that's been seemingly my friends and I have been talking a lot about lately, which is I feel like in our culture, in the United States at least, of sort of work and professional work, you forget that you have to be connected to nature, and that connection helps drive your energy and all kinds of things. And it's funny because when I go hiking or I go spend time outside, right, I come back and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so much better. And then yet I don't do it enough. So what got you so interested in hiking and spending time outdoors?
I think it started when I did a minor for my studies in Sweden, actually. So I was in the most northern part of Sweden, and I had a lot of free hours, so I could spend my time as I wished. So that was the first time that I started hiking actually with friends, and we went from hut to hut, and it just, well, for me it was magical in a way that you have so much time in your head actually to reflect and just to enjoy everything in nature and the sun, and it really puts things in perspective in a way. I think I just generally like to just go walk because it helps me to structure my own thoughts in a way.
Do you think you can get the same amount of sort of personal thinking space in the hustle bustle of kind of like city life or urban or work? Is that possible, or do you have to really get out and be out in nature to connect?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people also do meditation in a way that they take their own time to just sit down and unwind, or listen to some nice music that really helps relax people. But I think personally, when you're in the same surrounding as you're doing your job, working from home, for example, then I think it doesn't give the same effect. I think it's really important to just get out of your normal zone where you're in, and I think it's really necessary. At least for me, it is.
Well, finding the thing that helps you personally connect and do more and be the best version of yourself, I think is such a critical part of kind of growing up and getting into your career, right? You get lost a little bit in I got to do this thing. This is the next thing. I got this meeting. I got that meeting, instead of really sitting down and saying, okay, this is really important for me to do a good job, right? Like be my best self. Did you know that about yourself before Sweden, or was Sweden really part of that first time where you're like, okay, I really think this is important for me?
Well, let's say it like that. I'm always kind of a busy person. I like to be, well, inspired by a lot of things. So I have a lot of hobbies. So I think I, well, put myself in a difficult position to just have a lot of things scheduled in my agenda. So I have so many things, and I kind of miss out on taking that time. So if, well, if my agenda is totally full or filled, with all my hobbies, then I also need to, well, schedule like time to relax and be in nature, and that's something that's a goal in itself. Because normally you would say like, oh, I'll go out for drinks with friends, or we have a game night. But another, well, activity could be just walking or hiking. Um, yeah, so I think it's for me. I was always yeah, a fan of being outdoors. Also with a lot of sports that I did. So I played hockey and gymnastics for a time, for a moment. Um, but I was always outside playing. I think nowadays kids are more behind their screens and indoor, but I think the outdoors also brings a lot of creativity in fun games that you can, yeah, just come up with when when you're outside.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a parenting thing or if it's a culture thing. I know in the States, so many people look at my wife and I as like aliens by the fact that we don't do screens. We don't let, our daughter play on the phone. We don't let her watch TV. We want her to get outside. And she loves being outside, and that's awesome. But I remember growing up, and I don't know if my parents were intentional about it, but all my memories are about being outside. And I don't know why that has changed so much, other than I think it's easier maybe to just give your kids a screen. Um, do you think for you growing up, were your parents intentional about making sure you spent time outside, or was it just kind of part of the culture?
Probably they were intentional in a way, but I knew some friends who also had like a limit on using the computer for 1 hour a day, for example. I didn't have that, but I think it helped that they always encouraged me to do a lot of sports. So I was there a lot of times. I was outside, and so I was surrounded by a lot of people that also have the same, well, the same enthusiasm on like playing outside with the ball and just, well, have fun with it, or, well, play hide and seek in a way. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, obviously, like everything, if you find your tribe, even as a kid or as an adult, of people that are like-minded that do the things you like to do, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts, right? Like you're going to do what they do, and that ends up being what you like, and so you're happy doing it. Do you have favorite places that you like to hike other than Belgium? Are there like specific trails that you're like, man, that was one of the best ones I've ever done?
Oh yeah. That, I mean, you see, my passion
Yeah.
is vibrant. Um, so I also made, of course, you know that my website, which I posted all of the hikes that I did in the previous years. I think one of the hikes that was, well, I think most memorable was the hike in Japan. They have the Japanese Alps, and we did a 4 day hike with some friends from study, because we were there for like a business trip with all students, and we solved some cases for companies. And thereafter, we went to Kamikochi, which is a place, and from there, yeah, you will just hike up a few, I think, 1,000 meters, and then from there, yeah, we went from hut to hut. But yeah, it was like a sturdy terrain, a lot of rocks, really cool views, like clouds that were just, um, uh, yeah, that were just on one side of the mountain, but not on the other. And there were some creepy stairs that we had to cross, but we didn't really cross them in a way. And the cool part was that I think it's not only just the hiking itself, but also the experience of being in that culture with those people, because we got amazing food and like sushi and miso soup in the morning, and also in the evening. But we also hiked a lot of time actually, with grandparents with their grandson, and they were super cute, and they were hiking well pretty slow in a way, but they had those beer bells that were just like clinging all the time. But yeah, it was just really nice to see, and well, it really helps in just to yeah just to relax in a way. It was really cool. Yeah.
It sounds idyllic. Japan is one of Pamela and my favorite places. We've been to the Japanese Alps. We went like snowboarding and skiing, not hiking. But
Wow.
again, that culture difference has always been so interesting to me, right? Because Japanese culture is so Western in a lot of ways, like technology and how they interact, and yet also so culturally dramatically different in how they interact with the world, right? And so I just thought it was fascinating to be out there. That hike sounds like it was an amazing experience and something I hopefully will figure out someday. So, talk to me about how you got to where you are in your career. You're working at Flatland agency right now, right?
Yeah.
What is Flatland agency?
Okay, so Flatland is it's a visual thinking agency. We call it ourselves, but visual thinking is actually a method to use visualization or the act of visualization as a means to untangle complexity in a way. And as Flatland, we're a team of 30 people right now, and we're just helping companies to create their strategy or accelerate innovation or bringing about change in an organization. And we do that by facilitating creative sessions that has a lot of visualization in it. Yeah.
I think the first time I saw what you were doing, it kind of blew my mind. I've told you this. I think that people intuitively understand that visual is helpful, right? I mean, there's whether it was chalkboards or whiteboards or now, whiteboarding software that you can do stuff, right? Like it's helpful to see things. But I thought what was so fascinating about the way you did it was you're essentially facilitating thought and then taking words and putting them in images that people can recognize and whether it's pattern match or remember. And so it gives it like a much more visceral connection to your thought, your idea, right? And I thought that was so powerful. How did you come about getting into, is it called visual thinking? Is it visual strategy? Like, well, what is it?
Yeah, I think there are multiple words that are used. Sometimes it's visual collaboration or creative strategy making. So there are many words that are flowing around. But in this case, you can name it anything that you like. But if you would visualize this aspect of the process that we're facilitating, then it becomes more clear. And what I mean with that is that when we're talking, we're creating our own mental model in our minds. Like, oh, I think I understand you, or I create several associations with the words that you use. But when you use a drawing that's part of the conversation, then you're able to translate your own thoughts on paper, but also collaborate with each other and to adjust the information or understand that you misinterpreted some things of it could be anything. So it helps you to create that third reference point in a way, and that could be the visualization itself.
Yeah, I mean, untangling complexity is kind of the simplest idea of like what you do, right? And whatever medium you can use to help you get that complexity simplified or realized in a way that the whole team, the whole organization can understand, I think is really powerful. I also have loved the idea that you could take some of the like visual things you've created and make them physically real. right? You could put them in an office or in an area in your organization where you're like, that's where we're going. Look at that thing. That's what we're doing. I think that's really powerful. Um, what kind of organizations are you working with?
We're working in a lot of industries. For example, I'm really focused on healthcare at the moment because there's a lot of pressure in the Dutch healthcare system. That, well, of course, there are more people and they also need their own, well, treatment. But there's a lot of staff that's not there. The shortage, I mean. So I think in the health sector, but also in the energy transition, like a lot of organizations that are working or collaborating on a specific part, because they also have their own thoughts from their organization, so their own lens or perspective that they bring to the table. So there you can see a lot of added value by creating visualizations during the process.
Yeah, so pretty much anything that you can facilitate movement of ideas and reducing complexity into something that you as a team can understand and help get where you want to go, right?
Yeah, and I think it also differs a little bit in what what context or what kind of questions that they have. So, for example, you can use drawing in multiple ways. The first thing is that you can draw to think for yourself. So it could be an individual experience that you want to, for example, give a pitch or a presentation somewhere, and you can use drawing in a way to structure your own thoughts or thinking process. But the other side is you can also use it in collaboration. So, what is your vision of the organization in 2050? If you can draw it out and you can look at the drawing of also the other people within your management team, then you can, you know, see similarities or differences much more faster than you would do verbally. That's well, I think a great insight in a way. And the other part, and that's what you're also saying, like it becomes more tangible when you're drawing. Because if I want to say to you, or if you say like, oh, I want to work more sustainable, then I would say, how would you draw that out? Well, what is sustainability? What does it mean to you? And then, for example, one person draws a tree and the other person draws like a recycle sign, and those nuances are crucial also in strategy or execution in a way. So it really helps to draw it out, to also see what, well, people are actually thinking, because verbally we can get somewhere and we think we're on the same page, but when it, well, it becomes more tangible in a drawing, then it doesn't. And the last part, I mean, we have draw to think, draw to collaborate, but we also have to draw to share. And that's when I want to express a thought or an idea that I have. I can use a visual presentation to convince you to work on or invest in that idea in a way. So it helps on a lot of elements.
How did you get into this? Like, do you go to school for visual thinking or strategy, or like, is this an art school gig? Like, how did you do this?
Yeah, I think this whole concept of visual thinking is quite new. So I actually studied industrial design engineering, so more product design. So we had to draw like the really well, the really nice lines to create 3D perspectives of yeah, or for any product. Um, but then I did a master's at the TU Delft, the university, and I did a master's in strategic product design. So it became more not only how to create the product and make it work in a way, but also um, what is the thought behind it, and what kind of service is needed to put this on the market. And that's the point where we also started to learn how you can draw out not only like products, but also like a service or a system or a stakeholder map. And of course, these studies are pretty visual on itself in a way. And I think from there, I had classes about creative facilitation, and that really sparked my enthusiasm. And there was I think it was a fair that a lot of organizations came to the university to, well, of course, tell them what they did, and there was Flatland. So I also, already found them during that fair, and yeah, I was quite amazed, as you said as well, about like, is this work? Can you have fun and well, and draw, and it becomes really valuable for people in a way that's not just hobby like.
I have not seen I've seen a little bit of it in the United States, but I do think that this different medium, visual, can be really powerful. And so as you know, this is why I bother you about it pretty much endlessly. And why I think people would like to learn about it, right, is there's just this whole other world of how you might do things. And it's just another example of why if you can open up your frame, you can take things from other existences and use them in your business or in your life and better yourself and better your business, right? And so I think it's fascinating. Michelle, I know you just went on some sort of leadership retreat or some sort where you did visual exercises. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, of course. So the past 4 days, I was in Italy together with a group of leadership coaches that all train leaders in the academic field. And we were there because one of the coaches actually lives there in a very small village in the mountains. And what he does a lot during this leadership coaching is he organizes vision quests. And vision quests is something that comes back from the indigenous people in a way. And it was normally for men, or from guys that went out and came back and became real men in a way. And that's something that they did for. Um, I think the concept was that the guys would go out, walk into the desert, sit there, reflect, experience what kind of thoughts came to them in maybe some spiritual way. Uh, and they had to survive for at least 4 days with only water, no food, and only just maybe a blanket or even not. Um, Super ambitious in a way. But what we did is like a more European version because it was in the mountains because we don't have desert. And it was just for 4 hours. So it was really a small experience in a way. But it was really cool. So I think that experience for me was kind of life changing in a way that I think, okay, I can trust myself. I have some action intelligence in a way that I know what to do when such a scary situation happens. So I think I would, well, of course, stay safe, but I would invite everybody to just pick a time, sit somewhere in nature, and just, well, experience what happens to you and how you can relate that to, yeah, to some lessons or insights.
What made you go on a vision quest?
It was part of the program, so
Hmm.
not really inspiring.
Yeah, but it goes to show you sometimes when you're pushed outside of your comfort zone, you actually get some of the most monumental benefits for yourself, right? It's not
Yeah,
that
yeah.
surprising when you think about it, but it's kind of how it works, right? Talk to me about the culture of running a business in or being part of business in the Netherlands. One of the things I've talked to you about is I think it's really interesting to talk to people in different cultures, right? Like I'm in the States, we have a pretty work obsessed culture, for good or bad. And that also has sort of rules of like what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to interact. And I think one of the things we've been struggling as a work culture with over the last, well, for a while, but definitely since the pandemic is a lack of meaning in what you're doing, right? Is there's a lot of discontent right? Like this whole idea of like, I have to go into work, I have to do this thing, I don't believe in it, I don't know why I'm here, and you're just kind of like almost like the conveyor belt stuff, right? Do you have some of that going on in the Netherlands?
Maybe I'm in a bubble of
Mm.
people that are just really passionate about their work and really enjoy also telling about it, but also just working. Um, I think it differs a bit for the jobs that you can have. So, for example, if you're working with clients specifically, or sometimes, for example, in healthcare, then you can see what your effect is. And I think people that work more in an office setting, behind their laptops in a way, that it might be, well, less exciting in a way to work. But I think in the Netherlands, I think it's quite good actually. There's also a trend now going on, and it's called moral ambition circles. And it's actually a call out to people that are working for the big consultancies, especially because they're creating a lot of presentations. That's a little bit the business side of it. But there, it's actually a call out to them that, oh, you have so much potential, and why are you creating nice PowerPoint slides in a way? So this may be a little bit harsh to say it like that. But it's actually an invitation to, well, why won't you work or do this kind of things for an NGO? Something that really has a positive impact in a way. And, well, for example, for Flatland, we also have, or our mission is to draw a better world together. And that better world that also relates to, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals in a way. And I think that's becoming more and more a thing now.
Do you get the business community saying things to you like, why can't you get on this call later, or why aren't you working this hour, right? Because again, in the States, you get a lot of the expectation that you are available, right? And
Mhm.
I'm curious about that because I think if both sides can come to an agreement on kind of how the structure of your workday is supposed to be, that it would help with a lot of this, right? You see in like, again, other countries, not the United States, but like whether it's France or whatever, where like you're not allowed to get emails after a certain time or whatever it might be. Do you think that has benefited you both as like an employee, but also as like you're building your organization, that the client side also understands that expectation?
Yeah, or at least in the experience that I have, it is. I think family time is very important, or at least just time off work. So I think that we can say that after 5 or 6, you don't need to respond to any emails, because that's something that you would do the next day. It depends a little bit on personal things. If you have, of course, a very busy week, then, well, you might decide to respond earlier or look at your email in the evening, but it's not expected.
Yeah, we talk here a lot about this, and I talk a lot about this idea of accountability and agency, which is like there's structures. I have expectations of people that I work with. I have expectations of myself, but I also want to make sure that the people I work with have agency in what they do. Because I feel like if you lack the sort of ability to make decisions, to do things, you don't want to participate as much, right? And I think that's something we struggle with here. And I've talked to a lot of people in a lot of other countries, just like you, who this expectation setting is helpful in what you perceive as your job and what you're supposed to do, and therefore the effort that surrounds that, right, is you work really hard when you're at work, and then you go home and you live life. And I think that's very different than the United States.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's some things that I hear now and then, is that um, in the States, that people work until very late, but also wondering if it's that effective to work until that late.
Yeah. That's an interesting question, right? Because it goes back to even what we're talking about hiking or meditation or whatever it might be, is like you need to let your brain turn off and reset so that you can come back the next day, the next week, the next whatever with a fresh mind or ability. It's even like things like sleep, right? If you don't sleep enough, you're not very good at your job. Um, yeah, I don't know if we can solve the US's work life problems on this podcast today, but I do like to ask because I think it is a fascinating topic and looking at other cultures and how they deal with it for ways for us to improve.
Definitely. And to add one thing to that, I think one of the things that the Dutch people are quite famous about is the directness. So we're not afraid to ask these kind of questions like, well, this isn't efficient. Why are you doing this? Or why don't you, well, go home and come back tomorrow with a fresh mindset? So I think that also really helps in a way. It's sometimes confronting, but many times it's pure honesty, a little bit direct.
Yesterday, I was talking to a friend about communication, that like if we could just help everybody be better at communication, it would solve like all the world's problems, right? People frankly suck at it. They just are uncomfortable saying things, or they assume things, or they take offense to, like you said, somebody saying something direct to them. And it is for sure partially a culture thing, right? You get raised, at least in the States, a lot of this kind of like, don't offend people. You're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed to say this, instead of just, look, be kind, but be transparent, right? And like, if you can do those things, you're probably going to be okay. And so it's an interesting point, one I'll have to think more about. Does school or did work train you in communication? Like how to send emails or how to communicate on management, anything like that? Or is that something you just picked up as you sort of went through your studies?
It's something that you pick up from like all the experience that you have from school where you're told like, okay, you have to do your homework, and why didn't you finish your homework? So it's quite well direct already, and that's also I think how you would communicate to friends in a way. So it's of course it's open, it's authentic, but also direct, and it yeah, I think it's we had some classes on providing and receiving feedback in a way. Um, but I think the most is just something that I picked up.
Talk to me about this class, effective and conscious leadership, right? We chatted about it before. I thought it was fascinating. I think our audience would like to understand better. Like when you say effective and conscious leadership and connect it back to kind of like, I don't know if it's like hidden emotion, but like not forefront. What do you mean? Like, how do you go about figuring that out?
What the course actually says is leadership starts with self knowledge in a way. Um, there are certain things in life that might trigger you in a way, and that's well, yeah. There's just a situation happening, and then you will well express a certain behavior, and that's just what I said just before. That's about your blueprints. That's something that you created because you don't want to feel a certain emotion, and that emotion could either be anger, it could be sadness, or it could be fear. And of course, there are well less less heavy elements of that. So from anger, you have irritation or finding something annoying in a way, and from fear, you have maybe uncertainty or that you're doubtful of something. And with sadness, you of course you have the disappointment in a way, or finding something well very unfortunate. And as humans, we judge. Of course, we well we have a lot of uh, interpretations of a certain situation. But what's happening is that somewhere between your well when you were born until I think it's the 25th years old, you develop that certain blueprint, and that's because you experienced one of these three emotions. Of course, I don't mention happiness because it's a positive emotion, but the rest is more negative side. And during those years, you've developed the blueprint because of those situations where you experience these emotions very heavily. So what happens is then to guard yourself in a way, you're trying to experience. You're trying to do something that withholds you from experiencing, for example, the sadness or the anger. And that's interesting to understand from yourself. So, what are you experiencing at a certain point that you're triggered? What is your blueprint? And if you know that, you can also anticipate on it in a way that's more proactive instead of reactive. So, what you have to do for yourself then is start with, okay, so what is triggering me in that situation? What is the behavior that I'm showing right now? And think of what is the emotion actually that's underneath that I don't want to feel at this point. And what's the need really underneath that. So for example, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I want to do things good in a way. What's happening? I trigger on certain elements that I have to submit a report, for example. Something with a deadline, with expectations from other people. And what happens then is that the behavior that I show is that I either extend the period until I can't and I have to do the work. And that's because I don't want to feel the emotion of fear that I'm not doing it right or that I get rejected in a way. But sometimes also the behavior that I'm showing is that I'm overcompensating, that I'm doing all the things that I need to do, and more to have a little bit control on the situation in a way, to think of what could happen, what questions are asked, and I'm doing too much work actually, and that's also because of that emotion underneath, and that's the fear of rejection or that I'm not good enough in a way. And if you think about that, the need that's underneath it is actually that I want to have like self-confidence and don't ask for confirmation from something external, but just keep it internal and say like, I just need some more self-love, that I'm good enough. Because I think in the end, that's all for everyone. The ultimate need is, to be okay by just being here on the planet, or to feel seen or feel heard in a way. That's just one of the things that I'm talking a lot too much about it, but it's something that really fascinates me.
It is fascinating. And I think one of the things that I know about you is that you value learning and you're trying to improve. And I think that's part of this, right? I mean, not everybody goes out of their way to take classes, to even read books. I mean, a lot of people just, go to their job, go home and zone out on TikTok or whatever the heck it is, right? And what do you think has driven you to be somebody that's so interested in learning, has that growth mindset? Was that something that you got growing up from your parents, or where does that come from?
I think a lot of things come back from like your youth in a way. So my father actually has a PhD in physics. My sister is super smart, and I think during 8th grade. So I'm not sure if that's the same in the States, but it's like lower school, and she did a presentation on the world and the atmosphere in a way, while I was still presenting about dolphins. So that's a little bit the difference. So I think, of course, I got inspired by my family. And my mom, she's also super smart, but I think not more on the like something like physics or the technical things, but more emotionally. So what kind of questions should you ask, and what do I sense right now? What's something that you need? But I think they also always stimulated me to learn and finish school and go to university and find a job that well inspires you. Yeah, I think I grew up with a lot of reading books, and I love those self-help or management books. I have a lot of them in my yeah.
Effective and conscious leadership is also like a book, right?
It's a course, so we have
Oh,
seven blocks of 2 days that we have. Well, we get a lot of information, and then we're going to practice on each other, use peer coaching in a way, and quite be reflective on the session itself. So, okay, we're now in a group, and everybody wants to say something. What do I feel? Oh, I find it really annoying that two people are just talking through each other instead of listening to each other. And why does that bother me? What's triggering me? So you're like totally like analyzing your own thoughts during this conversation, during the sessions. But actually, the book that I'm reading, that's I'm not sure if that also mentions that method that I just mentioned about the trigger and the behavior and the emotion and the need, but it's actually about team coaching. Um, because of course I can relate it to my work in the way that I create a lot of well strategies, as I said, but that's really content wise, and that's something that you can agree on, but uh, that's just information. But what's actually underneath the, well, let's say the iceberg, that's like the team dynamics and what's happening and what's influencing what in a way. Of course, that also comes to attention during sessions, because when people don't agree on something, in my work, you can see it quite visually, because somebody would like to have something more bigger or more to the front or more to the back because it's less interesting. So you're actually kind of prioritizing information, but also giving feedback on each other's thoughts through the visualization in a way. And when these groups, well, sometimes they're really fed up because they're really passionate about one point that needs to become clear in the strategy and the other one doesn't. Sometimes it's really about the team dynamics and people don't feel seen, or nobody listens to them. And then you go underneath the iceberg, and then you're talking about what are actually the real needs underneath. So yeah, I'm just really enthusiastic about also what's happening that is not really content wise.
yeah. I think there's so much opportunity to take things you learn in all kinds of different places and apply them either traditionally in your business or non-traditionally in your business, right? And oftentimes the non-traditional gets you these really cool insights because you're thinking about things from a totally different perspective. And again, that's kind of why I'm so fascinated with the visual stuff, because it's like this other medium, as you said, where sometimes you're talking and it might go past each other, but then you like draw it and you're like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. And it just like clarifies something for you. So I think it's a really cool idea.
Yeah.
Within where you sit now, do you have plans on where you want to go? Is, you have this very interesting background, and knowing you, I know you have big goals and you want to do cool things. Is visual thinking something that can grow? And I don't mean Flatland specifically. I just mean, do you think this is something that spreads further within, organizations? Again, management consulting, although I do love this like ambitious circle thing. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it definitely is. I think it's even becoming more a trend, the whole concept of visual thinking. What you would see nowadays is that when there are conferences or big events or meetings, you see more and more these graphic recorders who are actually just drawing all information out that is said during such a conference. But I think that the step from like reactive, just drawing out what is said, that aspect will turn eventually, when people see the added value of it, more in the proactive way of drawing, which is, of course, as I mentioned before, that if you use it during the meeting, you can also ask feedback and improve the visualization itself during the session itself. So it's a lot of iteration loops that are present when you would draw in the moment itself, instead of reactive on a wall and then present like this is said, because it also has a lot of interpretations from the one who is drawing it, drawing the information, like, oh, we've been talking about this topic, and I would draw it out, and then it appears that it's not in the same context. So I think it becomes it will become, I foresee it becomes more a thing that's practiced in also in business itself. So I think visualization is a real professional skill. It's not something that you would only do in kindergarten to just, well, have a nice hobby on the side, but it's really a thing that will is one way to communicate effectively, I think. And to answer your question, personally, I mean, I have a big ambition to, well, we've talked about it before, but to combine those outdoor experiences by hiking, going through the mountains, have time to reflect, to combine that with maybe some leadership trails where you can also reflect visually on it. So use, well, the whole thinking process and then visualizing it in a way. So I think that would be one of the big ambitions that I have, to help people, well, individually or in a group, to, well, be a better person and do that outdoors.
People in general have started to really gravitate towards experience, and more than just reading a book, they want to connect it to something, and they want to learn and engage. And so a course that connects nature and movement and sort of a different way of thinking is fascinating. And whenever you get it off the ground, you let me know, and I will fly to Europe and I will hike wherever that is. I always like to ask people, how do you find time to be creative? Do you set time aside to just let your mind sort of lay fallow and then come up with ideas, or is that the nature part for you?
It's funny that you ask, because yesterday I actually had my creative club, or I hosted the creative club yesterday. I think, of course, in my work, I'm already quite creative, because as a facilitator, I work with a lot of illustrators that are super creative in their own way. So drawing is, of course, one of the aspects of creativity that's quite present in my life. But I also like to, well, doodle myself or create those vision boards. So I cut out a lot of magazines, some really inspiring images that I like. But I think I can get easily bored, or, well, I have like a thing that I think, oh yeah, now I can do this good enough, and then, okay, I want to learn something new. So that also happens for creative hobbies. So yesterday we started with creating stamps. So also my efficient mind thought, how cool is it to create a stamp for a birthday card that says something like yay. So it can also work for another celebration instead of birthdays. So we created several stamps, and we also did some ceramic courses, or we used some clay that can dry easily. So I like to, well, be creative in a lot of things. I think one of the, well, okay, I have to be a little bit slower in my explanation. But one other thing is that we did this because it rained. Because actually, my plan was to go outside near the water and the beach part that I'm living close by, and create like sand sculptures. That was the original thing.
What's the driving force that pushes you along, that makes you eager to learn, that makes you eager to do your job well and experience life? What's the driving thing for you?
The first thing that comes to mind is FOMO, but that's not a really positive word. But that's some of the, well, it's part of it, I guess. I just get everything out of my life in a way, and experience all the things that are possible. Yeah, just collecting a lot of cool new experiences, putting myself out there. Um, Also in uncomfortable settings, because I know I can learn from it in a way. So I think the positive mindset that it will help in a way in your life. That's something that that drives me.
It's an admirable thing to drive you, is to want to improve others and be kind to the world. I think if we could get more of that, we'd be much better off. So the second question I always end with is there any closing thoughts you have that you want our audience to take away from today?
Apart from the side that I would stimulate everybody to just start drawing your own thoughts. That's something, of course, and try to get out there. Get away from your screen. Listen to this podcast from Sal, because he's super inspiring.
I did not pay you to say that.
No, that's all me. Just be genuinely interested in people, and asking follow-up questions that will get you to a certain kind of conversations that you're, yeah, that's really valuable for both of the parties. So
Where can people find you? You have a website, I know, for hiking. You are on LinkedIn and various other socials. How can people find you?
I think the easiest part is through LinkedIn. Yeah, so Michelle Geerlings, that's a super Dutch name. But Sal will probably put it below in the comments, or the
I'll put it in
information.
the show notes in the comments. Yeah. And
Yeah.
what's your website? What's your hiking website?
So it's called hikewithmies.com, with MIES. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the time today. I can't wait till we have our next conversation.
Looking forward to it.